The galaxy trembled until sleeping humans finally awoke. For centuries, the galaxy lived under a shadow. Civilizations fell silent, crushed beneath alien rule. But deep within forgotten cryo-vaults, humanity slept, waiting. And when we finally opened our eyes, the galaxy learned fear once more. The silent void, the galaxy had forgotten what peace felt like. For 200 years, the Korthax dominion had spread across the stars like a disease, consuming world after world with their massive warships and cruel efficiency. They were creatures of pure ambition, standing 3 meters tall with crystalline exoskeletons that reflected light in ways that hurt to look at directly. Their empire stretched across 10,000 systems, and in each one, the native species either served or ceased to exist. Commander Zelkath stood on the bridge of his destroyer, the inevitable conquest, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. His latest prize, the peaceful world of Thymel, had surrendered after only 3 days of orbital bombardment. Their aquatic cities now flew the crimson banner of the Dominion, and their people would spend the rest of their lives harvesting minerals from their ocean floors for Korthax war machines. "Commander," his navigation officer interrupted, antennae twitching with confusion. "We're detecting something unusual in grid 779. Multiple metallic signatures, but no energy readings." Zelkath turned his multifaceted eyes toward the display. In the empty space between star systems, where nothing should exist except cosmic dust and radiation, floated a fleet of ships. They were strange vessels, blocky and utilitarian, with none of the elegant curves or crystalline structures favored by known spacefaring species. More disturbing still, they were completely dark. No engines, no lights, no signs of life at all. "How many vessels?" Zelkath asked, his mandibles clicking with interest. 17, Commander. They appear to be of identical design, approximately half the size of our destroyer. The metal composition is unusual, primarily iron and titanium alloys with traces of elements we cannot identify. The commander considered this discovery carefully. Dead ships meant salvage, and salvage meant technology that could be studied and exploited. The Korthax had built their empire partly through stealing and improving upon the innovations of conquered species. These mysterious vessels could contain valuable secrets. "Prepare a boarding party," Zelkath commanded.
"Full combat protocols."
"If these are trap ships left by some rebellious species, I want our warriors ready." The boarding shuttle launched within minutes, carrying 50 of the Dominion's finest soldiers. They approached the largest of the derelict vessels, which bore strange markings on its hull, symbols that matched no known language in the Korthax databases. As they drew closer, they could see that the ship, despite its apparent age and the micrometeorite impacts scarring its surface, was remarkably intact. Lieutenant Vexus led the boarding party through the primary airlock. The ancient mechanisms resisted at first, but Korthax cutting tools made quick work of the sealed doors. Inside, they found corridors filled with stale air that their sensors indicated was still technically breathable, though it contained unusual chemical traces they couldn't identify. The ship's interior was unlike anything they had encountered before. The walls were lined with thousands of horizontal compartments, each one roughly 2 meters long and sealed with transparent material that had frosted over from the inside. Power cables ran between the compartments, connecting them to massive generators that sat silent and cold in the ship's core. "Commander," Vexus reported through the communication link, "we've found something extraordinary. This appears to be some kind of suspension system. There are bodies inside these compartments, perfectly preserved." Zelkath leaned forward in his command chair. "Bodies? What species?" "Unknown, sir. Bipedal, similar in structure to the Altarians, but with less fur and different cranial structure. They appear to be in some form of stasis." The commander's excitement grew. An entire ship full of preserved specimens from an unknown species. This discovery would earn him recognition from the Dominion's highest councils. "Can you access their computer systems?" "Attempting now, sir." Vexus directed his technicians to interface with what appeared to be the ship's main computer terminal. The technology was primitive by Korthax standards, using simple binary code and electromagnetic storage that their advanced systems could easily decode. As they began downloading the ship's databases, warning lights suddenly blazed to life throughout the vessel. A voice, speaking in an unknown language, echoed through the corridors. The universal translator struggled for a moment before rendering the words. "Cryo-revival sequence initiated." Time elapsed 507 years, 3 months, 17 days. Beginning systematic wake protocol. The frosted compartments began to clear as heating elements activated. Inside each one, a figure began to stir. The Korthax soldiers raised their weapons, unsure whether they were witnessing a miracle or walking into a trap. The first compartment opened with a hiss of pressurized gas. A figure sat up slowly, rubbing eyes that hadn't opened in half a millennium. She was smaller than a Korthax, standing perhaps 1.7 meters tall, with dark skin and black hair tied back in a style that had been practical 5 centuries ago. The name on her compartment read, Captain Maria Rodriguez, UES Perseverance. She looked at the Korthax soldiers surrounding her, at their raised weapons and hostile postures, and did something that none of them expected. She smiled. Well, she said, her voice rough from centuries of silence, I guess the alarm clock finally went off, though you folks weren't quite what I was expecting to wake up to. Around her, more compartments were opening. Men and women of various sizes and colors emerged, all sharing the same bewildered but determined expressions. They wore uniforms of blue and gray, with patches showing a planet that the Korthax didn't recognize, a blue and green sphere with white swirls. Vexus kept his weapon trained on the captain. You are aboard a vessel claimed by the Korthax Dominion. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Maria stretched, her joints popping audibly after centuries of stillness. She looked around at her crew, all slowly coming back to consciousness, then back at the aliens pointing weapons at them. The Korthax Dominion, she repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. Never heard of you. But then again, we've been asleep for a while. Tell me, what year is it? Earth calendar, if you have such a thing. Your questions are irrelevant, Vexus snarled. You will submit to Dominion authority. Earth, one of the newly awakened humans said, a younger man with pale skin and red hair. Captain, they don't know about Earth. Maria's expression grew serious. She touched a panel on the wall, and screens throughout the ship blazed to life, showing star charts and navigation data. The computer's voice spoke again. Current location, 847 light-years from Sol system. Mission status, colony fleet intact, all 17 vessels accounted for. Crew revival at 73% and climbing. Colony fleet. Zelkath's voice crackled through the communication system. You are colonists? We were, Maria replied, steadying herself against the wall as her body continued to adjust. 500 years ago, Earth was dying. Climate change, resource depletion, wars over what little remained. So we took our chance on the stars. 17 ships, 50,000 souls looking for new worlds to call home. She looked at the Korthax soldiers, noting their aggressive stances and advanced weapons. But I'm guessing the neighborhoods changed while we were napping. More humans were emerging from their cryopods now, hundreds of them throughout the ship. They moved with the careful precision of people who had trained for this moment, even if it was happening 5 centuries later than planned. Engineers moved to check systems. Medical staff began examining their fellow colonists, and security personnel took positions throughout the ship, unarmed, but watchful. Vexus was growing nervous. They had expected to find ancient technology and dead aliens, not a ship full of living beings who seemed remarkably calm about waking up to armed invaders. Captain Rodriguez. Zelkath's voice came through the communication system again. I am Commander Zelkath of the Korthax Dominion. Your ships are now property of the Empire. You and your people will serve the Dominion or you will be eliminated. Maria found a water dispenser and took a long drink before responding. Commander Zelkath, is it? I appreciate your position, I really do. But here's the thing. We've been asleep for 500 years. Our planet is probably dead. We have no idea where we are or what's happened to the galaxy. So before anyone starts making threats, how about we talk? You can tell us about this Dominion of yours and we can figure out if there's a way to coexist peacefully. The Dominion does not coexist, Zelkath replied. It conquers. Well, that's unfortunate, Maria said, her tone remaining conversational even as her crew members began reporting in through their neural implants, a technology they had developed just before leaving Earth. All 17 ships were waking up. 50,000 humans were returning to consciousness to find themselves in the middle of a hostile galaxy. The long dream ends, the revival process was accelerating throughout the human fleet. On each of the 17 colony ships, the same scene played out. Confused humans waking to find Korthax soldiers pointing weapons at them. But something else was happening too, something the Korthax couldn't see or understand. During their 5 centuries of cryo-sleep, the humans had changed. The extended suspension, combined with the experimental enhancement protocols they had undergone before departure, had produced unexpected results. Their neurons had formed new connections while dormant, creating a subtle network between all 50,000 colonists. They couldn't read each other's thoughts exactly, but they could sense intentions, share emotions, and coordinate with an efficiency that seemed almost supernatural. Captain Rodriguez felt it first, a tingling awareness of her people across all 17 ships. She knew, without being told, that Engineer Chen on the New Horizons had already begun charging their ancient fusion reactors. She sensed that Dr. Okonkwo on the Endurance was analyzing the Korthak's biological structure through passive scans. She felt the calm determination of Colonel Johnson on the Victory as he assessed tactical options. "Lieutenant Vexus," Maria said to the lead Korthak soldier, "I need you to understand something. We didn't travel 500 years and nearly 1,000 light years to become slaves. We came seeking freedom and a new beginning." Vexus's crystalline exoskeleton rattled, a sign of agitation. "You speak as if you have a choice. You are outnumbered and outgunned. The Dominion fleet could vaporize your primitive vessels in minutes." "Primitive," Maria repeated thoughtfully. Behind her, her crew was quietly taking positions, their movements coordinated through their shared awareness. "You know, that's what everyone always said about humans. Even back on Earth, whenever a more technologically advanced civilization encountered a less developed one, they assumed superiority meant dominance." She walked slowly toward the view screen showing the exterior of their ship, her hands clasped behind her back. "But humans have this funny trait. We adapt, we learn, and we have this stubborn refusal to accept that might makes right." On the bridge of the inevitable conquest, Commander Zelkath was growing impatient. The boarding parties reported that all 17 human ships were now active, with thousands of beings emerging from suspension. His tactical officer was analyzing their vessels, finding them laughably obsolete: nuclear fusion reactors instead of quantum cores, projectile weapons instead of plasma cannons, and hull armor that would crumble under sustained fire. "Sir," his communications officer suddenly announced, "we're receiving a transmission from the human flagship. They're broadcasting on all frequencies." "Put it through," Zelkath commanded. Maria's image appeared on their main screen. Behind her stood dozens of humans of various appearances, all wearing the same determined expression. "Commander Zelkath and any other species who might be listening," Maria began. "I am Captain Maria Rodriguez of the United Earth Colony Fleet. We are humans from a planet called Earth in the Sol system. We left our dying world 5 centuries ago seeking a new home among the stars." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We've just learned that your Korthak's dominion has conquered much of the galaxy, enslaving peaceful species and destroying those who resist. We've learned that you rule through fear and force, taking what you want and crushing anyone who objects." Zelkath's mandibles clicked in amusement. "And knowing this, you still refuse to surrender? You would condemn your people to death for pride?" "Not for pride," Maria replied. "For principle. You see, Commander, humans have a long history with oppression. We've been both the oppressed and, shamefully, the oppressors. We've seen empires rise and fall, watched tyrants claim divine right to rule, and witnessed the suffering that comes from unchecked power." She gestured to the crew around her. "Every person in this fleet is a descendant of someone who fought against oppression, whether it was against colonialism, fascism, apartheid, or any of the countless other systems of control that plagued our world. We carry that history in our bones." The broadcast continued, reaching not just the Korthaks but every ship and station within range. On the enslaved world of Thymel below, the aquatic beings listened through hidden receivers. On the mining stations scattered throughout the system, subjugated species heard the transmission and felt something they hadn't experienced in generations: hope. "We've been asleep for 500 years, Maria continued, "but we're awake now, and we will not stand by while you terrorize the innocent. We may be outnumbered, our technology may be centuries out of date, but we are humans. We survived ice ages, plagues, wars that nearly ended our species, and finally the death of our own planet. We didn't come this far to kneel before tyrants. Zelkath had heard enough. All ships prepare to fire, destroy the human fleet." But something unexpected happened. The human ships, which had appeared dead moments before, suddenly burst to life with an energy that seemed impossible for their ancient reactors. They moved in perfect synchronization, as if controlled by a single mind, forming a defensive sphere that maximized their overlapping fields of fire. More surprisingly, they began broadcasting something else, not words but music. It was a symphony of Earth, compiled from thousands of pieces from hundreds of cultures. The music filled the communication channels, a deliberate jamming that was also a statement. Even facing destruction, the humans chose to share beauty rather than respond with threats. On the planet below, the enslaved Thymalians heard the music and began to weep. They had forgotten that such beauty could exist. In the mining stations, workers stopped their labors to listen. Even some of the Korthax soldiers found themselves momentarily entranced by the alien harmonies. Fire! Zelkath roared. The Korthax fleet opened fire, plasma beams and quantum torpedoes streaking through space toward the human ships. But the colonists had not been idle during their response. Their shared consciousness allowed them to react with inhuman speed and coordination. The 17 ships moved as one organism, dodging and weaving through the barrage with a grace that defied their bulky appearance. More importantly, they had learned. In the minutes since waking, their enhanced minds had absorbed and analyzed every piece of data about Korthax technology. They understood the frequency modulations of the plasma weapons, the trajectory calculations of the quantum torpedoes, the refresh rates of the shield generators. The human ships returned fire, but not with weapons meant to destroy. Instead, they launched what appeared to be ancient nuclear missiles. Technology so primitive the Korthax shields didn't even recognize them as threats. The missiles detonated in seemingly random patterns around the Dominion fleet, creating a cloud of electromagnetic interference and exotic particles. "What are they doing?" Zelkath demanded. "Those explosions aren't even reaching our shields." His answer came moments later when every Korthax ship suddenly lost power. The electromagnetic pulses, combined with particles specifically tuned to interfere with crystalline-based technology, had created a resonance that shut down their quantum cores. The mighty Dominion fleet hung dead in space, emergency power barely keeping life support running. But the humans didn't press their attack. Instead, Maria's voice came through on emergency channels. "Commander Zelkath, we've disabled your fleet, but we haven't destroyed it. We could kill every one of you right now, but we won't. That's not who we are. We're offering you a choice: leave this system and never return, or stay and help us free those you've enslaved." "You think you've won?" Zelkath snarled. "The Dominion has thousands of fleets. They will come for you. They will burn your ships and scatter your ashes across the void." "Maybe," Maria admitted, "but that's tomorrow's problem. Today, right now, you have a choice. What's it going to be?" The forgotten children. While Commander Zelkath wrestled with his damaged pride and disabled fleet, Captain Rodriguez called a meeting of all 17 ship captains. Through their neural link, they gathered in a shared mental space, a virtual recreation of Earth's United Nations Assembly Hall, a fitting symbol for what they were about to discuss. "We need to understand what we've become," Maria began, addressing the assembled leaders. "The cryo-sleep changed us in ways the scientists never predicted." Captain Yuki Tanaka of the Sakura nodded, her mental projection shimmering slightly. "My medical team has been running diagnostics. Our neuroplasticity has increased by 400%. We're processing information at speeds that should be impossible for baseline humans. And this connection between us, it's like we've become a collective consciousness while maintaining our individuality. It's more than that," added Captain Kwame Asante of the New Horizon. "My engineers report that we're somehow interfacing with technology on an intuitive level." They understood the Korthax systems within minutes of seeing them. "It's as if our brains have become quantum computers." Maria absorbed this information, feeling the weight of 50,000 lives on her shoulders. "Then we need to decide what to do with these gifts. We came here as refugees, but we've awakened to find a galaxy in chains." "We could run," suggested Captain Pavel Volkov of the Resilience. "Find an uninhabited system, establish our colony as planned, and avoid the Dominion entirely." "Could we?" Captain Ana Silva of the Hope challenged. "Could we build our new paradise knowing that billions suffer under Korthax rule? Could we raise our children in peace while other species' children are born into slavery?" The debate that followed was intense but respectful. These were people who had volunteered to leave everything behind for the chance at a new beginning. They were scientists and artists, engineers and philosophers, farmers and teachers. They were not soldiers, yet they found themselves in the middle of a war they never asked for. Meanwhile, on the disabled Korthax destroyer, Commander Zelkath received an unexpected visitor. A small human shuttle had docked with his powerless vessel, and through the airlock walked a single human, an elderly man with kind eyes and weathered hands. "Commander," the man said, offering what Zelkath would later learn was called a handshake. "I'm Professor James Wright, xenopsychologist. I thought perhaps we should talk, one being to another." "I do not negotiate with primitives," Zelkath spat. Though he noticed his soldiers were too demoralized to raise their weapons, James smiled and sat down on the floor, crossing his legs in a way that made him appear even less threatening. "I'd like to tell you a story, if you'll indulge me. It's about why we left Earth." Without waiting for permission, he began. 300 years before we left, humans split the atom. We thought we were gods. Within a century, we had weapons that could end all life on our planet. We came within minutes of using them several times. He pulled out a small device, projecting a hologram of Earth, not the blue and green jewel of ancient times, but a brown and gray dying world. We poisoned our oceans, burned our forests, and filled our air with toxins. Wars were fought over clean water. Millions died from heat waves, storms, and plagues. By the time we realized what we'd done, it was too late to save Earth. But we learned something valuable in those final years. Zelkath found himself listening, despite his anger. There was something in the human's voice, a deep sadness mixed with hope. We learned that strength without wisdom is destruction. Power without compassion is tyranny. We nearly destroyed ourselves because we forgot that all life is connected, that what harms one eventually harms all. James looked directly at the commander. "Your dominion reminds me of humanity at its worst. You have such incredible technology, such power, but you use it only to take and destroy. What happens when you've conquered everything? What happens when there's nothing left to dominate?" "We will rule forever," Zelkath stated, though the words sounded hollow even to him. "Forever is a long time to be alone," James replied softly. "And that's what you're creating. A galaxy of slaves who hate you, who will never truly accept you, who wait only for the chance to overthrow you. Is that really the legacy you want?" Before Zelkath could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. But they weren't his alarms. They were coming from the planet below. On Thymel, something unprecedented was happening. The aquatic beings, inspired by the human transmission and the defeat of their oppressors' fleet, had begun to resist. Throughout their underwater cities, they overwhelmed the skeleton crews of Korthak soldiers left to guard them. The music the humans had broadcast had reminded them of their own songs, the ones they had been forbidden to sing for 2 centuries. Similar uprisings were occurring throughout the system. Mining stations went silent as workers laid down their tools. Supply depots were seized by species who had forgotten they could fight back. The entire infrastructure of Dominion control, built on fear and maintained by the threat of overwhelming force, began to crumble the moment that threat was neutralized. Captain Rodriguez watched the developments from her ship, feeling the collective consciousness of her people reaching a decision. They had not come to this galaxy to be conquerors or even liberators, but they could not stand by and watch oppression continue. "All ships," she broadcast to the colony fleet, "prepare for humanitarian operations. We're going to help evacuate and protect any beings who want to leave Korthak's control. Deploy medical teams to assist the wounded. Engineering crews. Begin repairs on damaged infrastructure." She then turned to the Korthak's fleet. "Commander Zelkath, your empire is falling. Not because we destroyed it, but because it was built on a foundation of fear. Fear is powerful, but it's also brittle. The moment people see it can be overcome, it shatters." On the inevitable conquest, Zelkath watched his tactical displays showing uprising after uprising across the sector. Distress calls flooded in from Dominion outposts, each reporting the same thing. The subject species were revolting, and they were winning. Professor Wright stood up, preparing to leave. "Commander, you have perhaps the most important choice of your life to make. You can go down with your empire, clinging to the old ways until they destroy you, or you can be part of building something new, something better." "Why?" Zelkath asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why would you show mercy to those who would have enslaved you?" James paused at the airlock. "Because, Commander, we've learned that the only way to break the cycle of violence is to choose not to continue it. Mercy isn't weakness, it's the ultimate strength. It's saying that no matter what you do to us, you cannot make us become like you." As the human shuttle departed, Zelkath stood alone on his bridge, watching his empire crumble on the tactical displays. For the first time in his life, he wondered if there might be another way to live. The tide turns. The revolution spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within days, news of the Thymal uprising and the defeat of Zelkath's fleet had reached hundreds of systems. The story grew with each telling, ancient humans rising from centuries of sleep to challenge the Dominion, their primitive ships somehow defeating the Empire's finest technology. But Captain Rodriguez knew the real battle was just beginning. In the command center of the Perseverance, she coordinated with resistance leaders from dozens of species. The human neural network had evolved again, now able to interface with alien communication systems, creating bridges of understanding between species that had never been able to communicate directly before. "The Dominion is mobilizing their main fleet," reported Siveth, a serpentine being from the Aurelia system, who had been leading underground resistance for decades. 3,000 ships led by Supreme Admiral Korthus himself. "They'll be here within 7 days." The assembled leaders, both in person and through holographic projection, fell silent. 3,000 ships against 17. Even with their newfound abilities, the humans couldn't hope to win a direct confrontation. "We don't fight them ship to ship," Colonel Johnson stated, his tactical mind already working through scenarios. "We fight them asymmetrically. Guerrilla warfare on a galactic scale." "Explain," requested Thymal's newly freed prime swimmer, her aquatic features glistening in the ship's atmosphere. Maria stood, activating a star map. "Humans have a long history of defeating superior forces through unconventional tactics. During our world wars, resistance fighters held off armies with nothing but determination and clever strategy. We're going to teach those same tactics to every free being in the galaxy." Over the next 5 days, the human fleet dispersed, each ship traveling to different systems to spread their knowledge. They taught the physically weak but intellectually gifted Morphians how to create computer viruses that would turn Dominion weapons against their users. They showed the industrious makers how to convert their mining equipment into improvised weapons. They helped the telepathic essence keepers develop mental shields against Korthak's interrogation techniques. But perhaps most importantly, they taught hope. On the frozen world of Kelos, Captain Tanaka stood before thousands of freed slaves, her words translated into a dozen languages simultaneously through the neural network. "The Dominion wants you to believe that resistance is futile," she said, her voice carrying across the icy plain. "They want you to think that because they are stronger, they have the right to rule. But strength comes in many forms." She gestured to the mixed crowd, insectoid hivers standing next to silicon-based crystallites, gaseous drifters floating above furry warmlings. "Each of you has abilities the Korthaks cannot match. Hivers, your collective communication makes you impossible to divide. Crystallites, your bodies can survive in environments that would kill Korthaks instantly. Drifters, you can pass through their shields like they don't exist. Warmlings, your metabolic control lets you hibernate for months without food, outlasting any siege." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Alone, each of you is vulnerable. Together, you are unstoppable." Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening with Commander Zelkath. After days of contemplation, he had made a decision that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. He opened a communication channel to Captain Rodriguez. "I want to defect," he said simply. Maria studied the Korthak's commander through the screen. Through the neural network, she could sense no deception, only a deep weariness and growing understanding. "Why?" she asked. "Because the human professor was right," Zelkath replied. "We've built nothing. We've created nothing. We've only taken and destroyed. I've spent my life conquering worlds, and for what? So that my species can stand alone at the top of a pyramid of hatred." He transmitted tactical data to the human fleet, shield frequencies, weapon specifications, and most crucially, the psychological profiles of Dominion leadership. "Supreme Admiral Korthus is brilliant but inflexible," he explained. "He cannot conceive of defeat, which makes him blind to unconventional tactics. He'll expect you to either flee or meet him in traditional battle. He won't expect." "Won't expect what?" Maria prompted. "He won't expect you to surrender." The human captain raised an eyebrow. "Surrender?" "Not truly," Zelkath clarified. "But if you appear to surrender, he'll want to make an example of you. He'll gather the entire fleet in one location for a public execution. It's the Dominion way. Crush resistance through spectacle." Maria's mind raced through possibilities, the neural network allowing her to process thousands of scenarios in seconds, and if we could disable their entire fleet at once. The Dominion would fall within days, Zelkath finished. Without their military might, they have nothing. The bureaucrats and administrators would flee, the subject species would rise up everywhere, and centuries of oppression would end. You're suggesting we use ourselves as bait. I'm suggesting you use the Dominion's arrogance against them. They cannot conceive that primitive humans could be a threat. Use that blindness. As the human leadership debated this risky strategy, something remarkable was happening throughout the galaxy. The resistance was working, not through military might but through solidarity. When Korthak's forces attacked one world, others sent support. When supply lines were cut to punish rebellious systems, free traders, inspired by human courage, smuggled in necessities. The Dominion's response was predictably brutal. They destroyed 3 colonies completely, reducing them to cosmic ash as a warning to others. But instead of crushing resistance, it only strengthened resolve. Every atrocity created more rebels, every punishment more determination to be free. 5 days later, Supreme Admiral Korthas arrived with his massive fleet. His flagship, the Final Authority, was the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Humans, his transmission boomed across all frequencies. You have caused chaos in my dominion. You have corrupted loyal subjects with your primitive ideas of freedom. You will serve as an example to all who would oppose us. Maria responded from the bridge of the Perseverance. All 17 human ships gathered in what appeared to be a defensive formation. Supreme Admiral, we acknowledge your superior force. We ask only for the opportunity to discuss terms. Korthas's laugh was like breaking crystal. Terms? The only terms are unconditional surrender. Lower your shields and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will result in your immediate atomization. We need time to consider. You have 1 hour, Korthas interrupted. Then I begin destroying your ships one by one until you comply. The channel closed and Maria turned to her crew. Through the neural network, she could feel all 50,000 colonists preparing for what might be their last action. Are we ready? She asked. Dr. Chen, the chief scientist, nodded. The quantum virus is prepared. If we can get it into their systems, it will spread through their entire fleet in seconds, but we need them to lower their shields to board us. And if it doesn't work? Then we die, Chen said simply. But we die free, and we die fighting for something greater than ourselves. Maria felt the weight of the decision. They had left Earth to find a new home, not to become martyrs, but sometimes history demanded sacrifices. All ships, she broadcast through the neural link. Prepare for Operation Liberation. If we fall, others will rise. If we die as humans, standing for what's right, even against impossible odds. The hour passed quickly. When Supreme Admiral Korthas contacted them again, Maria stood ready. We surrender, she said, the words tasting bitter even as she knew they were necessary. We ask only that you spare our children. Children? Korthas seemed amused. You brought offspring on your colony ships? In the cryo bays, Maria lied smoothly. 10,000 children who have never woken, who know nothing of this conflict. We ask that they be allowed to live, even if as servants. The Supreme Admiral considered this. Children could be molded, shaped into loyal servants from birth. It would be a fitting irony, human children serving the dominion their parents had defied. Acceptable, he declared. Lower your shields and prepare for boarding. Any resistance will result in the children being spaced. One by one, the 17 human ships lowered their defenses. The Dominion fleet moved in, surrounding them completely. Boarding craft launched by the hundreds, each carrying Korthak's soldiers eager to punish the humans who had humiliated their empire. But as the boarding craft approached, something unexpected happened. The human ships began to sing, not with voices, but with their very hulls. The colonists had discovered they could modulate their shield frequencies to create harmonics that resonated through space itself. It was the same music they had broadcast days earlier, but now with a purpose beyond beauty. The harmony created a carrier wave, invisible to Korthak's sensors, that carried Dr. Chen's quantum virus directly into every Dominion ship simultaneously. The virus, designed using knowledge gleaned from their enhanced understanding of Korthak's technology, didn't destroy or damage. Instead, it did something far more insidious. It made every Korthak system completely transparent. Every encrypted file, every secret communication, every hidden atrocity was suddenly broadcast on open channels for the entire galaxy to witness. A new dawn the galaxy watched in horror as centuries of hidden crimes poured forth from the Dominion's own systems. Videos of genocides that had been classified as pacification missions. Communications between Korthak's commanders laughing about the suffering they caused. Scientific experiments performed on sentient beings, children taken from their parents to be raised as living weapons. But perhaps most damaging were the financial records, proof that the Dominion's economy was built entirely on exploitation. Without slave labor, without stolen resources, without the constant expansion through conquest, the Korthak's empire would collapse within months. On the final authority, Supreme Admiral Korthas watched his empire crumble in real time. Every screen on his bridge displayed different aspects of the catastrophe. Enslaved populations rising up as they learned the full extent of Korthak's crimes, his own soldiers laying down their weapons in shame, allied species within the Dominion turning against their former masters. How? He roared at his bridge crew. How did primitives with ancient technology do this? But even as he asked, the answer was broadcasting across the galaxy. The humans hadn't defeated the Dominion with superior weapons or technology. They had defeated them with truth, with unity, and with an idea that no amount of force could kill. The idea that all sentient beings deserved freedom. Captain Rodriguez opened a channel to the Supreme Admiral. Behind her stood not just humans but representatives of dozens of species, including Commander Zelkath. Supreme Admiral Korthas, Maria said calmly, "Your empire is finished. Not because we destroyed it, but because it was always destined to fall. Every empire built on oppression carries the seeds of its own destruction. You think you've won?" Korthas snarled. "You've merely created chaos. Without the Dominion's order, the galaxy will descend into warfare. Species will turn on each other. Billions will die." "Maybe," Maria admitted. "Freedom is messier than tyranny. Democracy is harder than dictatorship. But it's also the only way for diverse species to coexist peacefully in the long term." She gestured to the mixed group behind her. "We're not proposing chaos. We're proposing cooperation. A galactic alliance where each species has a voice, where disputes are settled through negotiation rather than force, where the strong protect the weak rather than exploit them." "Naive fantasy," Korthas spat. "The strong have always ruled the weak. It is the natural order." It was Zelkath who stepped forward to respond. "I once believed that too. But strength without purpose is meaningless. The humans showed us another way. They had every reason to destroy us, every justification for revenge, yet they chose mercy. That is true strength." Across the galaxy, the transformation was already beginning. On Thymal, the aquatic beings were working with human engineers to rebuild their cities, not as they were under Dominion rule, but as they had been before, beautiful and harmonious with their ocean world. The Harmonites were teaching their crystal songs to human musicians, creating new forms of art that bridged species. The Morphians were sharing their advanced mathematics with human scientists, accelerating both species' understanding of the universe. But not everyone accepted the new reality peacefully. Pockets of Dominion loyalists fought viciously, destroying entire colonies rather than see them liberated. Some Korthak's commanders activated doomsday weapons, preferring mutual annihilation to surrender. The path to freedom was paid for in blood and sacrifice. 3 months after the fall of the Dominion, representatives from over 1,000 species gathered on Haven, a neutral space station that humans had helped construct. The Galactic Assembly, as it came to be known, was chaotic and contentious. Species that had been enemies for millennia now had to work together. Former slaves sat across from former masters. The debates were heated, sometimes violent. Maria, elected as the first human representative, often found herself mediating between species that could barely stand to be in the same room. The neural network that connected humanity had evolved again, allowing them to serve as universal translators and empaths, bridging gaps between species that had never been able to truly communicate. The Korthax must pay for their crimes, demanded the Thymalian representative, her fins flaring with anger. 2 centuries of slavery cannot be forgotten. And yet, Maria responded carefully, if we pursue vengeance, we perpetuate the cycle. The young Korthax who are born today had no part in the Empire's crimes. Should they suffer for their ancestors' sins? It was a question that humanity had grappled with throughout their history. How to balance justice with mercy, accountability with reconciliation. There were no easy answers. The solution, proposed by a young Korthax named Zeltura, Zelkath's daughter, was revolutionary. The Korthax would dedicate their advanced technology and resources to rebuilding what they had destroyed, but not as penance or punishment. Instead, as partners in creating something new. Each Korthax would spend time living among the species they had once oppressed, learning their cultures, understanding the damage that had been done. We cannot undo the past, Zelthara said, her crystalline form dim with shame, but we can choose a different future. The humans, meanwhile, faced their own challenges. The colony ships that had set out to establish new homes now found themselves at the center of galactic civilization. The 50,000 who had left Earth as refugees were now viewed as liberators, teachers and bridges between species. Dr. Chen, studying the continued evolution of human neural capabilities, made a startling discovery. The network wasn't just connecting humans anymore. Other species who spent extended time with humans began developing similar connections. It seemed that humanity's transformation was contagious, spreading the capacity for enhanced empathy and understanding. We're becoming something new, she told Maria. Not just humans, not just individual species, but something greater, a true collective consciousness that maintains individual identity. Some humans feared this change, worried about losing their humanity in the merger with alien minds. Others embraced it, seeing it as the next stage of evolution. The debates within human society were as intense as those in the Galactic Assembly. 1 year after awakening, Maria stood on the observation deck of the Perseverance, now permanently docked at Haven Station. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see ships from 100 different species coming and going peacefully. The station itself had grown into a small city, with districts adapted for different atmospheric and gravitational needs. Colonel Johnson, now head of the Galactic Peace Corps, a volunteer force dedicated to preventing conflicts before they started, joined her at the window. Did you ever imagine this when we went to sleep? He asked. I imagined finding an empty planet where we could start over, Maria replied. I never imagined we'd help the entire galaxy start over. Some of the colonists want to continue the original mission, Johnson noted. Find an uninhabited world and establish a pure human colony. Maria nodded. She knew about the debates, the factions forming within humanity. Some wanted to remain separate, to preserve human culture unchanged. Others wanted to fully integrate with galactic society. Most fell somewhere in between. What do you think? Johnson asked. I think, Maria said slowly, that humanity was never meant to be alone. Even on Earth, our greatest achievements came from different cultures mixing, sharing ideas, learning from each other. Maybe this was always our destiny, not to find a new home, but to help create one for everyone. An alert chimed on her communication device. Another crisis, a territorial dispute between 2 former Dominion colonies. There would be many more such conflicts in the years to come. Building a peaceful galactic civilization from the ruins of an empire would take generations. But as Maria looked out at the stars, she felt hope. Humans had awakened not just from cryo-sleep, but to a purpose greater than mere survival. They had become the bridge between species, the healers of ancient wounds, the teachers of a simple truth that had taken humanity millennia to learn. Diversity is strength. Cooperation is survival, and freedom, however messy, is always worth fighting for. 5 years later, the first multi-species colony ship launched toward the Andromeda Galaxy. Its crew included humans, Korthax, Thymalians, Harmonites, and dozens of other species. They went not as conquerors or refugees, but as explorers and ambassadors, carrying a message of hope to whatever civilizations they might find. The ship was named the Second Chance, And its mission statement, broadcast in 1,000 languages, was simple. We go in peace seeking friends among the stars. Commander Zelkath, now an admiral in the Galactic Peace Corps, stood beside Captain Rodriguez as they watched the ship disappear into the dark between galaxies. Do you think they'll find others out there? He asked. I hope so, Maria replied. And I hope when they do, they'll share what we've learned, that the greatest strength any civilization can have is the ability to see beyond ourselves, to recognize that we're all part of something larger. The humans gave us that gift, Zelkath said. You woke us all up, Maria shook her head. We just reminded you of what you already knew deep down. Every species has the capacity for both creation and destruction, tyranny and freedom. The choice is always there. We just helped you remember that it was a choice. As the years passed, the story of humanity's awakening became legend. How a species that had slept for 5 centuries woke to find the galaxy in chains and chose to break them, not with weapons, but with hope. How they faced impossible odds and triumphed not through superior technology, but through superior ideals. The children born after the liberation grew up in a galaxy where diversity was celebrated, where conflicts were resolved through discussion rather than destruction, where the strong protected the weak because they understood that true strength came from lifting others up, not pushing them down. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, still those who yearned for the simplicity of the old ways. Some species struggled to forgive ancient enemies. Some humans regretted ever waking up to such responsibility. But when historians looked back at the moment the galaxy changed, they all agreed on one point. It began when humanity opened their eyes after 500 years of sleep and chose compassion over conquest, unity over division, and hope over fear. The galaxy had trembled under the Dominion's rule for 2 centuries. But when humans woke from cryo-sleep, they brought with them something more powerful than any weapon, the unshakable belief that tomorrow could be better than today, and the determination to make it so. In the end, that was humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. Not their enhanced abilities or their role as mediators, but the simple, stubborn refusal to accept that might makes right, that the strong must dominate the weak, that fear is stronger than hope. They had traveled nearly 1,000 light years and slept for 5 centuries, only to discover that their true journey was just beginning. Not to find a new home among the stars, but to help create a home where all could belong. The galaxy no longer trembled. It sang, a harmony of 1,000 different voices, each unique, all united, reaching out together toward a future bright with infinite possibility.